something that will,
Oh, yeah.
So
and it's amazing how clear.
We have to have two scopes, really.
my
You have to one
doctor's
scope to take the picture and one scope to track. Because even
So
the
if I want to
ones that
really see
automatically move, they're not accurate enough
Okay.
glasses on, and these will
to
correct
track it
both
for
eyes.
photography. So you actually
I
have
want
to
to
have
read
another
close
scope,
in the office lately.
electronic feedback into the mount that adjusts it.
I just sit here.
It's kind of intense, but yeah.
This is kind of like a real investment.
Oh, it is, I do, I'm an avid astronomer
That Ronald Reagan used to go
since a little kid.
speeches with one
Okay.
contact lens in.
I remember going up to the
Contact lens was for reading,
that observation hill
and he had like trained himself to be able to
in
focus on
Heinsberg.
Oh, yeah, Observatory Road, yeah, that's the VAS. We just put in a new,
Wow.
observatory.
But he also
Okay,
insisted on
two
keeping the
sheds
lights
and
up
new
in the
scopes
audience
and-
when he.
okay. Do they still do an open
That
house?
part I
They
understand.
do,
'cause
I'll
the
invite
lights
you,
start to
yeah,
shine.
if you're
Yeah, because I
interested.
just remember going, it was just so
think it was
cool,
Saturday.
saying Saturn, and you could actually see
I'm
the
sure,
ring.
but-
Oh my
Wow.
gosh, that's so, I do that for my, I do that in my driveway, invite people over to come look.
Yeah, and it's just like,
everybody.
it's true, you know, they weren't lying.
We have an 18-inch scope there, so.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Select Board meeting. I call the meeting to order, and the first order of business, we have two sets of minutes to take care of tonight. Minutes of October 16th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1.
So the only thing, Terry, on the public comment, do we typically, I don't know, it's like a political advertisement,
Well, he was here and he talked.
so that's typically we document that?
We have never had that happen before,
Okay,
but he was here, he talked.
All right.
and
Yeah.
So it's part of the minutes.
okay.
Page 2.
You know, this is a question, it's not a comment, but under number 8, the Muddy Brook Crossing Bridge Replacement Alternatives Review, I wonder if they should mention that, you know, it was fairly well attended, audience, public participation. I just wonder if that should be reflected in the minutes.
Sure.
I mean, I guess it does in a sense when it says others present, but
I think it's a good idea.
So how would you like to word something on that?
maybe, you know, several, numerous, I don't know, or approximately, what was it, about 10 folks from the audience participated in the discussion.
Anything else on page 2? Page 3? Just wonder if we, under the first bullet, under the manager's report, talks about the interest revenue is running high, perhaps just higher than in the past.
Okay.
Recent past.
There was a time when it was quite a bit higher.
Yes.
So just higher than budgeted?
Projected.
Probably true, yes.
Projected. I like that.
Anything else on page 2? And if not, all those in favor of approving the minutes of October 16th, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, and one abstention, say
Abstain. Yes.
Moving on then to the minutes of October 23rd, 2018. Is there a motion to approve?
I'd move to approve the minutes of October 23rd, 2018 with any amendments thereto.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Page 2. Hearing no corrections to the minutes, all those in favor of approving the minutes of October 23, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions?
I was gonna make a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
I was
Go ahead.
way behind you. So I was looking at the actions and steps, and I noticed there's no names against anything. Did we at the meeting identify leaders for each of, or at least some of these? I thought we did.
In the end, it's my responsibility, so if you want to put my name next to all of them, I certainly will be delegating some of it, but it really is my responsibility to make sure that the requests of the select board are followed through on.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
So let me try this again. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And one abstention.
Abstain.
Okay. So we'll move on then to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to make any comment on anything on the agenda or not on the agenda today? Seeing no hands raised, we'll move on to the interviews and appointments, and we have two people to interview tonight for different positions. First is the Development Review Board, and we have Jill Kwong with us tonight. So Jill, if you'd come up to the table, if you would give us just a brief, we do have your application form here. If you'd give us a brief resume of your background and why you'd like to be on the DRB.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to come in and interview today. I had actually saw the position being advertised on Front Porch Forum, and it's something that I had considered earlier, within the last 5 to 10 years, considered as something that I would be interested in doing. So my background is that I am an attorney, and I am I work in real estate. Joy and I have had the privilege of working together in the past, but I represent a different facet of real estate. I represent title insurance companies. So my, sort of what I do is a little bit different than Joy, but it's all sort of trending around real estate. And I've also had some experience buying and selling properties, owning rental properties, building and selling a couple of, and condominiumizing. So I've also had a little bit of personal experience on the development side with my husband. And I think and then my other experience prior to working for a title insurance company was as an attorney for a municipality. So I worked for Stitzel, Page and Fletcher. I don't know if Page and Fletcher ever represented the town of Williston, but they represented many municipalities throughout the state of Vermont. So early on in my career, I was a zoning attorney for Stitzel, Page and Fletcher. So I had sort of that piece of it where we would, look at zoning decisions and appeals of zoning decisions and be representing the town on behalf of those. So certainly, and then also making determinations on, does something comply, doesn't it comply with the zoning regulations. So all of those pieces of my career over the last dozen or so years has sort of led me to think, okay, well, maybe this is something that I would I have some qualifications to do. So that's what led me to interview, and that's sort of my background and where I'm coming from.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Questions from the board?
Well, actually, just a full disclosure thing. I don't know if I need to step down. Jill and I actually shared office space together. She's eminently qualified for this, but I don't know if our having worked together on a regular basis would need me to step down. You don't care? Teresa?
Shared office space together.
Okay, well, worked on numerous projects together, so.
Okay. But you were the same firm, or?
Nope, separate. She just is title insurance counsel, so I get to work with her, but she is,
Okay.
you were eminently qualified for this. I'm delighted to see you step up. Thank you.
So can I ask, what's your motivation? You're clearly qualified from your work and I guess sitting next to Joy, but what is it? What is your motivation for being on the review board?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I guess I don't have I'm not like pro-development or anti-development, or there isn't a stance or like a political stance that I come in with. I think that I would love to be part of making sure that whatever development occurs in the town that I love and live in is responsible. And so to that extent, I think that having a voice on a board like that is something that's important to me. So I'd say that's my motivation.
Where are you a field hockey coach?
In Williston, so a couple of years ago, I started a program for, my daughter is in 3rd grade, so she's 8. I have a younger daughter who's 3, but I started the program for her last year when she was 7, just because there wasn't a youth field hockey program in Williston. So I started it.
Great.
And last year it was good. This year it was great, and I am looking forward to it continuing to improve.
Sounds good, thanks.
Further questions?
So my questions are, I'm going to have twofold. The first one is about, I guess the question is there are going to be projects in which you're going to have to take a stance. Not take a stance isn't maybe the right place to put it, but your interpretation of Williston's bylaws might be different than how, let's say, a developer wants you to interpret those bylaws. And so my question is what do you do in that circumstance? What is your guiding principles, if you will, in approaching those decisions? Sometimes those hard decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, obviously, you have to follow whatever the bylaws are for the town. So to the extent that there is not ambiguity, then I'd have to do what the bylaws permitted. If there was ambiguity, and I think that's the circumstance that you're describing, would be that, I can't say that my own, personal influences might not come into play, but I would like to think that my guiding principle would be fairness, would be able to have an unbiased as much, or try to reduce the bias as much as possible in terms of just trying to gather the information, listen to my counterparts on the board, listen to the perspectives of others, listen to the perspectives of the developer, and just try to make the most informed decision based on all of those inputs.
Okay.
It sounds like a really political answer, though, doesn't it?
I can't answer that question. So I'll move on to the second part, and you probably, being an attorney, have a good answer for this. For some reason, this falls on my shoulders, so I ask that of all applicants. I'm not singling you out in any way. And it's the conflict of interest question. And the question is how would you recognize it, and what would you do about it?
So in terms of recognition, I mean, there's, in what I do, there's probably going to be very little conflict of interest because I represent a national title insurance company making underwriting decisions. So this is usually after a project is built. It would be the only time that we would even ever be looking to insure something. So the conflicts that might come up for me would be much fewer. It might be a personal acquaintance or something where you would, I think it would be much more obvious that there would be a conflict. Certainly if I were involved, which I'm involved in very little development, although I have had a history of doing a couple of projects. But the only other potential conflict is that my husband is a contractor, and he's an electrical contractor, and Williston, he owns New England Electric. And so there could be a potential there where he's been asked to bid on a project. But again, I would think that would be a little bit further down the line in terms of a project having been approved at that point. So he usually wouldn't, get a bid. But in terms of trying to recognize a conflict, certainly just, if it's something that I have any kind of personal or monetary incentive, that would be a very clear conflict, and I would recuse myself in those instances. You're welcome.
Further questions? If not, we thank you very much for your willingness to serve, and I think we'll decide this tonight, I hope, anyway. So thank you. Is there a motion to be made?
I'd move to appoint Jill Spinelli-Kwong to the Development Review Board for an unexpired 3-year term through fiscal year 2020.
Is there a second?
Second?
Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none.
candidate. And just to verify, there is no other candidates. Okay, I see that here then.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed, and no abstentions. Congratulations, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks for your time, and we'll be in touch.
I'll be in touch tomorrow.
So the next person we have is a person who has applied for the town service officer, James Thornton. So, Mr. Thornton, if you would again take the chair and again briefly give us some of your background and your reasons for being a candidate for the town service officer.
I'm Jim Thornton at 44 Chelsea Place in Williston. I have not had a full-time professional background in community service. I noticed that was one of the statements made. This would be a good position for someone with full-time community service. But I have served on boards with the Burlington Children's Space, Spectrum Youth and Family Services, Neighbor Keepers, and Scouts, and other activities where we were involved with dealing with needs of other persons. I've also had Red Cross training in disaster services response, which doesn't really match this except for understanding the needs and the agencies that might meet those needs when you're dealing with someone in a disaster situation. I'm retired. I have the time. I don't need the money, and I don't need the salary that's offered. And so here I sit.
Thank you very much. This is a position that has existed in statute for a long period of time. We've had a service officer who served us well over a course of a number of years, and not a lot of activity, but very important to have a position like this for people who do need the help. Further questions from the board?
So could you go over the duties of the service officer, the full duties?
Sure, I can speak to that, and Rick or Tara, if you want to add anything as well. It serves as a liaison for folks in need of social services. There might be an inquiry to the town offices that we could refer to the town service officer, help connect them with state agencies, nonprofits to provide assistance, and work to come up with a plan for long-term support to address those needs that the individual may be looking for help with. So kind of that connective tissue liaison person to help out folks in town.
Great.
Further questions?
And I guess my question would be is, given that explanation, are you comfortable with doing that, playing that liaison role?
Yes, Eric actually has been very clear throughout the whole discussion between us via email that this is actually a position that's sort of morphed over time, and it might morph some more, and as of March it might not exist. So I'm very aware of that, and part of my background is taking a situation and trying to figure out what we're really trying to do here, and helping to define what we're doing here.
So, two questions, one for Eric and maybe one for Jim here, but did we take this out of the town charter? Has this been a remove?
Yeah, it's one of those, so it would be not requiring the position to be filled, but the select board could still appoint
Find the
someone
right
to the
person.
role.
Okay,
We just
got it.
remove the requirement clause.
Just reading your application, Jim, it says Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee.
Yes.
So you were looking for,
Well,
That
if
as
this
well.
would replace that, no. I
Oh,
didn't
okay, so
understand
you're
that it
not-
would. No, I very much appreciate and enjoy that opportunity. If that's a conflict, then I would choose HAC.
Further questions? If there are no further questions, then thank you very much, Jim. Is there a motion to be made?
I'd move to appoint Jim Thornton as Town Service Officer for an unexpired term through June 30, 2019.
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion?
I didn't ask my conflict of interest question.
I was wondering.
No one's ever said,
Oh, I have a huge conflict.
I have a huge conflict of interest, and
Yeah,
I'm never
exactly.
gonna let it go.
It's not, and I'm sorry, we're getting off track, I'll be real brief. It's not to try to catch them or anything, it's just to see how they respond.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's great,
I think it's a good question, but such is life.
so I apologize. I did not mean to not ask you.
No, that's fine. Would you like an answer?
Sure.
You heard the question, so.
I can't imagine a situation where I wouldn't put myself before someone else. First of all, I pretty well take care of myself anyway, and my focus would be on meeting their needs, not trying to aggrandize myself in any way. I don't know how else to respond to that. I can't imagine having to recuse myself because I wouldn't be involved with any agencies where I would have to do that.
The case might be where you know the person personally. Let's say.
Fair enough.
Yep, and,
I would still follow, I'm not the one that would be deciding the response to their need. I would be guiding them,
good point.
and I would be careful to guide anyone. Like I said, I've learned to identify resources over time, and I'm going to have to do that in this case for sure. But I would be focused on guiding them toward the resources they need, period. I don't know how else to respond to that.
I'm not sure I have a good answer for that either. One thing I can say, if you do have questions or concerns, if appointed, I would speak with, Eric or Rick.
I have had very good communication, very clear communication with Eric and Jennifer. They've given me the very best answers they could. That's one of the reasons I'm sitting here. If there'd been anything unclear in those communications, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Good, thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. Congratulations and thank you very much for volunteering to serve. So we'll move on to the Library Board of Trustees annual report. And I think Steve Perkins is the new chair of the board. And we have Marty Fisk as the director. And we have a full house, I think, of all the committee members here too.
Yes, our fellow board members are here in the audience. All right, so I was told I'd get to do this wonderful report here once a year, so this is my chance to hopefully shine for the library. Before I get into details, I just wanted to say that part of my job is to travel around the state, and I do programs, I give programs, I visit libraries throughout Vermont, and almost every library that I visit, they speak very positively about the Williston Public Library. And many of those libraries do hold it up as an example of what a library can be in Vermont. So I think this certainly is a feather in the cap of not only our hardworking staff, but also our elected officials. That includes the board of the library, you, and the Williston community at large. So we certainly care about this library, we support this library, and that only makes our community stronger. My immediate predecessor as chair of the library board, Carla Carson, said, I have to have a theme to my talk. So last year, I think she talked about the Olympics and medals and all sorts of stuff like that. I'm not nearly as creative as Carla is, but I did get thinking about what happened since we last met and thought that this past year is certainly a mix of trials, or at least one big trial, and a number of triumphs. So I'm going to start with the trial. I think you all know about the flood at the library this past winter in January. It closed the library for 8 business days, ultimately about $26,000 in flood damage to the library, but that could have been much, much worse. I think this situation, it really showed off our staff's mettle. It proved that our emergency response plan worked. And it illustrated how our building and operations are resilient in the face of a disaster. So very little material that I think the community cares about the books, was lost, and somehow the pipe gods decided to burst 1 week before the anticipated recarpet of the entire building. So it just helped with that demolition a little bit ahead. But certainly thanks to the staff. I received a phone call the day it happened. I just so happened to be in town and came down, and between the radiant heat, heating up the water on the floor, it was like a kind of a sauna in there, and moving things in and out, but worked very well, and great job with Marty and her staff on that. So that was trials. So on to some of our triumphs. The bookmobile, we'll still call it a new bookmobile. It's newer than the old one. But it continues to serve the people of Williston. We continue to add stops. If you don't know, it does visit the 4 largest preschools during the school year that provides teaching and reading materials, and up to 12 story times for up to about 185 children each month. So that's the kids, and certainly throughout the summer hitting neighborhoods and whatnot to dispense books, loan out books, and other materials to folks in those neighborhoods, but also serving our senior community. We focus a lot on children, but this bookmobile also serves our senior community, and this year we added Williston Woods community as one of the stops. So great work there with the bookmobile. We have added a number of new services, I think, as the face of how people use libraries change. One of the things we look for are digital services. So beyond your traditional print books or even a CD that you can check out from the library, but things that we can download. So we've added a number of services over the past couple of years. We just barely added a new service in the past, 2 months, September, Marty, called Hoopla. But that even allows folks to download TV series or movies from our own library, all online. The volume of folks who use this is still small because it's a relatively new thing, but the growth in usage of this is geometric rather than linear. So we keep getting our reports at the library on the percentage growth in usage of downloadable materials. So, for example, audiobook downloading was up 35% year over year. And you want to compare that to the lending of traditional materials, which really kind of fluctuates a couple of percentage points here and there. So certainly a growth area for this library. Last year, we were experimenting with what it means to have the school right in our backyard dismissing early on Tuesdays, and how that affects the library. I have young kids who love to use the library and go there after school, and it's a very common thing for students to go after school when it lets out at 3. But what happens when the students get out at 2 and they're now at that library for 3 hours? I think I really credit the library staff for saying this can be a positive, and working with the school, creating great programs, that it really was a positive. My daughter stays there on Tuesday afternoons, and I love to go in there and just see it's a hive of activity. And the kids are great, they're respectful, they have a good time. Marty and crew put on great programs for them, everything from Lego clubs to movie afternoons, so that is really a great resource for the parents of this community on those early release Tuesdays. And then some kudos to Marty. Marty is in her second year of a 4-year term as the Vermont representative to the American Library Association Governing Council. So this council shapes and recommends policies and best practices for libraries around the world, and she's representing our state for that. So thank you, Marty. So those are some of our triumphs. You can certainly read about more in the great written report that I'll be putting together for the town report. But looking ahead into the future, I think you all participated in a strategic planning informational retreat. Am I correct in that? Yes. So you did hear some of the results of the surveys that the library conducted over the past few months. So we're in the midst of that. The board will be working hard on that strategic plan, as will Marty and staff. So we look forward to what that says in the next couple of months. In the short term, as a library, we're continuing to make adjustments to the current space and furniture, working our way room by room through the library to make it more comfortable and accommodating to a modern library user. So with that, I'm going to end my report. Thank you.
Marty, anything to add?
Only that, talking about early school release, we actually have some kids who are there for the entire 4 hours. We close at 6, so, yeah, 3 hours is when the vast majority, but we still have hangers on well after that. So it's been really a good program that Jill and Sarah have put on. We've sometimes have 2 programs in the afternoon on those early release Tuesdays. We'll have something that starts right at 2 o'clock and something else that will start at 3:30. The only other thing I think I would add is I wanted to recognize that we have had a lot of long-term staff. Some of you may know. Debbie's been with us for 32 years. Jill Coffrin will be with us for 15 years. Kim Piney has just celebrated 10 years. Kathy DeLuca, 5 years. Christina, I think, is 7. So we have a very large portion of our staff who've been with us for a long time. And we have to thank you as a select board with the policies that you've implemented for the good employment practices here. Thank you.
I remember when the library existed just as the one small brick building, and what a tremendous growth we've had in town and the wonderful library services that we have here. Comments or questions from the board?
Okay, well, can you talk a little bit about, just explain the concept, maybe is a way to put it, of using the library in the digital age?
Yes.
Does that mean I visit the library in a digital sense, or does it mean I still go to the library and do my digital downloading at the library?
It depends.
Okay.
We do have a few people who use us almost exclusively for digital services. We tend to see them when they come in to update their library card. That's a tiny portion, though. The vast majority of the people who are coming in are regular library users who are supplementing with the digital usage. The digital usage is still a very small portion of our total circulation. Last year, it was just under 6% of our total circulation. But that's an increase from 2% of our total circulation 5 years ago. So it's changing, but it is changing very slowly.
Can you give, it's a good topic, can you give an example of some of the digital resources?
Sure.
I heard books earlier.
Yes, so there are the e-books.
Are those free to?
They're free to you as a library card holder. We actually have 3 sources now for digital e-books and digital audiobooks. And now we also have downloadable music. You can borrow a music album for a week. That's on Hoopla. We have digital television, downloadable television series, and digital movies. Those are also available on Hoopla. Hoopla also offers graphic novels, which is a form of ebooks that we haven't had before because of the heavy content. The graphic content is a little bit different for the service. So Hoopla is very good for those audiovisual types of downloads. We've also done a lot more of our communications digitally, so we're sending out emails now twice a month that are going directly to people's inboxes. And we also have a new service called Wowbrary that sends out an email to the people who subscribe once a week that lets them know about all the new materials that have been added to the collection in the last week. And it breaks it down by genre type, age group, and the like.
Are there any research periodicals that you have that we don't have access to?
All of the libraries in Vermont subscribe to the Vermont Online Libraries, so that has excellent resources, not only your things like your Chilton's manual so that you can change your own oil on your car, It has a business owners section so that you can get articles to help business owners. It has general reference. It has a section specifically aimed for youth as well as adult juried section. Has a medical reference component. It's something, I want to say, golly, I want to say something like over 100 titles on just topics. If you go to our website, it like breaks it down to like what your particular focus is, and then there's hundreds within each of that. And then we have some that are more specific to certain things. We've got foreign language learning. That's called Mango. Excuse me. You can even learn how to talk like a pirate if you want to. But it also has, Pashtun, Arabic, French, Italian, German, and the like. And that has a feature so that you can speak and get your correct accent if you've got a microphone. We've got A to Z World Travel, so it's a good travel database. If you're going to be traveling, you can do some research on the place you're visiting, currency, politics, routes that you want to take, public transit, and the like with that. And I'm totally blanking. We have a whole bunch of digital resources for research.
That's great. I need a library card.
Yes. In fact, I think yours might have expired. Better come back soon.
Further questions or comments?
The bookmobile, so how often, just trying to get a sense of how often, you described who's getting the services from it, and I'm trying to think of it from the standpoint of how often is it not sitting, where it is sitting right now?
So it depends on what the season is. So because of the season right now, we are visiting the 4 daycares. So that comes out as once a week. It's going out to a daycare. And we're visiting, as of January, it will be 3 senior facilities. So 3 times a month, almost once a week, 3 times a month to a senior community. That's the winter service. During the summer, you have the senior communities still, plus it is out every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday through the late afternoon and into the evening. And then we're also doing community events. So if you were at the Chowder Festival, you would have seen us there at the Chowder Festival.
And then my last question is, and I ask this pretty much every year, what can we expect in the budget?
So I actually just had my, I just had my budget meeting with Rick today. The main thing that you will see is that we're asking for an increase in substitute hours. One of those, the big chunk of those substitute hours would be to have a summer bookmobile driver. What we have been doing is staffing the bookmobile driver by pulling our youth services librarian, Jill Coffrin, and our adult services program librarian, Kathy DeLuca, out of the library during the busiest months of the year. July and August are by far our busiest months of the year, and we've been having to reduce the amount of time that they're available to provide their services by having them do the bookmobile. So this would have a substitute driver during the summer months for the bookmobile. It also has a $1 an hour pay increase for substitutes to bring us on par to the competitive prices for area libraries for substitute services, substitute librarian services. Then there's an increase for collection materials. Most of it is to support the digital services that we just started. And there is a couple $1,000 for HVAC system duct cleaning. We haven't had the ducts cleaned since the building was built. So that's 1960 for one section, 1988 for one other section, and 1996 for another. The ducts haven't been cleaned since then.
Very good, thank you.
Further questions, comments? Really want to thank the Board of Trustees of the library for all their work that goes into running the library along with the staff, and you do a tremendous amount of work for us, so thank you very much. Always look forward to your annual report.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good night.
we're running just a few minutes early for the public hearing. I wonder if we can skip to the Chapman Lane agreement for about 5 minutes.
Sure. Yep, just pull my notes here. So as the board probably recalls, on that rainy afternoon, we visited Chapman Lane in October, and the board took action later that evening to discontinue a little over 100-foot section of the road. This is just kind of looping back to the beginning of this discussion. That evening, we looked at the culvert in question that needs replacement to be upsized. And when we started this discussion for discontinuance, staff met with the adjacent landowners, the land batters who now own that property, the discontinued section of roadway, and had a discussion about the town replacing that culvert. So what we've done is we've drafted an agreement. Legal counsel's reviewed it. The land batters have reviewed it. I've spoken with them at the end of last week, and they had one question about snow plowing that they spoke with Bruce about today. It doesn't directly affect this agreement, but just operationally I had a question for Bruce. And I've heard when we spoke that they were fine with all the language in here. What we would look to do is ask the board for approval for the town manager to enter into this agreement. We would look to execute this agreement with the land batters, hopefully later this week, so we can get the schedule for the culvert to be replaced this month. We have a permit to do so, which expires December 15th, I believe, but Bruce tells me, and we want to do this sooner rather than later we don't know what the weather's going to be. So this would be replacing that culvert in that section of discontinued roadway.
Questions for Eric?
No, the only thing I'm looking at is number 4, the culvert replacement. And if I make sure, I just want to make sure I interpret it correctly. Up until the time the culvert is replaced and the larger culvert is in service, for lack of better words, is in use, the town still has responsibility for any flood damage that might occur. Maybe not flood is the right word. I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
Well, I'm not sure that's true now, since we've given up the road.
Okay.
But there, as part of this whole thing, we had all along told the land batters we're going to replace it at the same time, or about the same time, we're abandoning that section of road. So there's a kind of an implied commitment at this point.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I understood this correctly. We're still carrying some responsibility up until the time the culvert is replaced. After that, our responsibility is gone. We no longer have any responsibility.
Well, yes, the last statement is absolutely true. There's a question about, I mean, we don't have anything in writing saying that we have a responsibility now for that, since we've abandoned that section.
Okay.
But once we fix it, this agreement clearly states that we are not accepting any more responsibility at that point.
Right, so we're transferring the property back to them. So basically, at that point, we have no formal responsibility except for our commitment to replace the culvert, period.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the statement that says, if between the time the section of Chapman Lane is discontinued and the culvert is replaced, an issue impacting stormwater damage arises at the culvert, the town will take responsibility for its resolution.
Jeff, that's handy legalese for if anything happens, everybody's up for grabs.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, that's the reality. If something happened, you're going to go after everybody that you possibly could and see who gets to get themselves out of it.
So if we have a 100-year flood and we wipe out the culvert, we might have to replace the road at that point.
You might.
Or we're planning on doing this before December 15th?
Yeah.
I think, I live for that kind of danger.
I get what you're trying to do with your question, but you're not going to get the answer you're looking for.
Okay, all right.
Says
Fair
two
enough.
attorneys.
So I should interpret this as that's as much wiggle room as can be written into this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Creatively so.
Further questions or comments?
Just for Rick, the date for the culvert replacement?
As Eric said, our permit extends through December 15th, so we have to get it done before that.
So you will do it?
Our crew
in the
is
next
going to.
few months?
Yes,
Oh, you
Next
will
few
actually
weeks.
do it with your own crew?
I believe so. I believe that's well, actually, well, no,
Maybe a
not.
contractor. I think Bruce is leaning towards a contractor.
Yeah, okay. Well,
He was waiting
It's
to
a
have
big
this.
culvert.
waiting to have this executed before we engage a contractor on the schedule, so.
Okay, that's great. There's some projects we do ourselves, but I think Eric's is correct, that this particular one, Bruce decided to have a outside contractor do the work.
It's pretty aggressive. I mean, we're already in November, so.
It's not a huge project. It's something you can do in a matter of a couple days, but it's just a matter of scheduling.
Okay, great.
Further questions or comments? The motion would be in order.
I'd move to authorize the town manager to enter into an agreement with Daryl and Stephanie Landvatter to replace a culvert on the recently discontinued section of Chapman Lane.
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed and no abstentions? So now we can move on to the public hearing, and this is on the comprehensive plan amendments. Read part of the warning. Under the authority of 24 VSA section 4385, Williston Selectboard will hold 2 public hearings to receive public comment on proposed amendments to the 2016-2024 Williston Comprehensive Plan. Hearings will be held on Tuesday, October 16th, 2018, and Monday, November 5th, 2018. The proposed amendments include Chapter 13, the name change from open space to natural and cultural resources, the addition of language in Chapter 13 directing the town to refine its local standards related to river corridors, forested lands protection, and archaeological and cultural resources to better achieve protection of these resources in alignment with state goals, and a new 2016-2024 Village Master Plan as an appendix to the 2016-2024 Williston Comprehensive Plan. So the public hearing is now open, and Matt Belanger, our Director of Planning, is here to give us a brief overview of what we're being requested to do.
Certainly. So as you read off in the agenda and introduction, these are 2 proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan. One, the village master plan, is a complete document unto itself, proposed to be adopted as an appendix to the existing plan. Over time, the document is structured such that it would be partially implemented over the lifespan of the plan and further integrated into the overall town plan as we looked at the 2024 iteration of the complete Williston Comprehensive Plan. The other proposal is amendments to the existing open space chapter, expanding that chapter a little bit, both in name to cover some of the other natural and cultural resources, and in particular to add some language that we know is coming in the required elements of plans related to forest fragmentation, and meeting a requirement to give some thought to how the town will work to protect archaeological resources. That last one was important. It was the one thing that the State Downtown Board found the town out of compliance on when we went to renew the Growth Center just about a year ago, and they gave us a year to get something adopted in the plan that said we would address archaeological resources. So we've now identified that. This is you're the Select Board's second public hearing. Mr. McCaig identified by email 3 or 4 typographical errors to fix. I've noted those and would happily make those part of the adopted draft. We've had an article published in the Observer, or rather an article was published in the Observer about this village project. Maybe some of you have read it. Not received a great deal of comment. I had one local business owner comment that we weren't going to be able to do enough planning to make a restaurant or coffee shop actually work in the village. He took a fairly dim view of it, and I said, well, we're going to try to get out of the way at least. That was all I've really heard since I've seen you folks last in regards to these matters.
Thank you, Matt. So this is the time now for anyone in the public to make a comment or ask questions regarding the proposals that are before us tonight. Yes.
I came especially because I used to work at the coffee house in Williston, and it was a great addition, and a lot of people came, had coffee, had lunch, had breakfast, came after school when they dropped their kids off to have a cup of coffee on the table. And lots of people had meetings there. And I think it would be great to have something like that back.
I support what Bruce was saying, because I used to work at that coffee house also. And I think it's something missing in our village. I don't know too much about the details because of the historic district. Where would it be a new building? Would it be just outside the district? I'd like to hear more about it, because I think it's a great idea also. I had hoped the little brick house that had the coffee shop could have made it, a successful adventure. And I know that Eric from the Williston Coffee House is really looking to expand. He mentioned once about waiting for Cottonwood Crossing. He has a very small shop. I enjoy going there, so I would like to see Eric even be interested in this. I just thought of that today, so I haven't had a chance to ask him, but I'm for it.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting because tonight we just did the library report, and one of the trustees for the library. But I was just talking with somebody that was on your board the other night about the fact that the two reasons that sold us on moving to Williston were the coffee house and the library. So it's kind of ironic that I didn't realize this was going to come up tonight. But it was a really strong support of a community, in the village that really had something that you could walk to and really feel like you were part of the village. So I think trying to find a suitable location and a person who could run that, I think would be really a wonderful addition to the village. And a lot of the other towns do have coffee shops. So while Eric's one, over by Rite Aid, is great, it doesn't have quite the ambiance that something right in the village would have. So I would strongly support that. Maybe more people move.
Thank you.
And it was very successful, the coffee house. When the two women that ran it, they were very successful.
I'm thinking, what can the town do, maybe to pave the way for a proprietor to set up shop? I think that would be quite nice. I like what Heinsberg has done myself, and they have a nice coffee shop now, which I go to a lot because, for lack of I go to Williston Coffee Shop, but sometimes I like going to Heinsberg. But they put curbs in and some parking spots. We all think of Williston because we live here, so we know it. But I think a lot of people just drive through the village who maybe don't think too much about it because there isn't something to suggest. There's something worthy to stop and park, and so some parking spots right on the street, along with curbs similar to what Heinsberg has done, I think might be a good idea. And maybe to start small, just right here in these two little blocks, or I don't know if you call them blocks, but just these few buildings here, you could put in 20 parking spots, potentially, or just, that's a ballpark, and some curbs, just to suggest, hey, slow down here in the village, here's some places to park, and go check out the library at least, because that's what we got. But, and then maybe if you build it, they will come, the proprietor of the coffee shop, and hey, who knows, maybe a second business. Well, yeah.
Thank you. Further comments from the public? We share your enthusiasm. Perhaps you ladies would like to be entrepreneurs and open a coffee shop somewhere.
I have to also add too, that the village plan, of course, comes under the auspices of planning and zoning and the conservation commission, which I'm also on, so I didn't realize it would be a free-for tonight.
Right. If there's no other comments on this tonight, public comments, we would close the public hearing. So feel free before we do that. If not, then a motion to close the public hearing is in order.
I'd move to close the public hearing on proposed comprehensive plan amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll move on to considering adoption of the comprehensive plan amendments.
So should we have, Mr. Chair, do we have the opportunity to comment, or?
This is your time. This is the board's time to comment.
You take comment now? Okay,
I'm open
so
to comments.
one of the things, I really like the section on, working out the village master plan over the next I guess the next 2 years, and putting detail behind it with the kind of the headings and things you had in here. And I like the idea of somehow finding a way to put a small amount of, we have so little space, it seems, but put a small amount of commercial, something that would bring people in. And I think the library is one good piece, but maybe, the coffee shop is probably the best idea, if you could somehow put that next to the library without moving the statue, right? So, but I was wondering if besides the historic character that you're trying to preserve in the town, and a lot of your things have to do with that, whether we should have anything there where we promote, kind of some of the things that we've been looking for to drive into the town, conservation, energy efficiency, reducing light pollution, use those as kind of, we're a modern historic town, if you will.
Well, I think in general, the objectives in this plan that call for looking at the land use standards,
Yep.
understand that those land use standards or restrictions are in balance with other goals in the plan. So you want a place that aesthetically looks like a historic village. But one thing we've recognized over the years is we actually have limited say over what happens with things like rooftop solar. So, you will see houses in the village that have rooftop solar panels. They don't come under the purview of local zoning. One thing the town may end up doing, whether it's through the way it looks at land use here or what the upcoming energy plan says, is say, we're okay with a historic village, but we're okay with seeing some solar panels adapted onto even some of those historic buildings, reflecting that balance between the two. I think the way this plan talks about streetscape, there's a desired streetscape section going back to the 90s that involves things like iron lampposts. Well, Williston Village has never had iron lampposts, but they tend to signal something when you come into a place, that it's a place that some attention's being paid to, that it's not just a strip along the state highway, and tends to identify it as a more historically conscious place. So I think, a lot of what the village master plan was about was to set a course of, let's make a list of everything we really ought to be thinking about in the village, and then let's say we're going to work through those things piece by piece. And there's a lot of room in the way this is set up for those subcommittees or task forces of the planning commission or planning commission itself to work out how is this all going to balance with all these other things the town's trying to do.
So out of that, do you think there's a way to come up with a plan that promotes both?
Yes.
Historic nature as well as conservation, energy efficiency, the things I think we're trying to go after as a town, right? And
Right.
support.
So, for example, on solar panels, just because it's easy, what we're going through, the energy plan talks about preferred siting. There might be a point where the input to the energy plan from the village plan is preferred siting for solar panels is generally in backyards, because there's a view shed from the road, similar to the way the current design guidelines talk about skylights on houses. Say we'd rather have skylights facing backyards, not facing the street, because it just, it's a very modern architectural feature. It's hard to hide it, that sort of thing. So I think there's room to use those stated desires in this plan and connect it to those other things. And there's ways to achieve both types of goals. there's tension here with wanting businesses to be able to be viable and not wanting every last inch of the village to be a parking lot. You know, the person who was critical of the ideas in here of supporting a coffee shop said, well, people aren't going to go if they can't park. And, you know, there is a limitation there at some point, and you have to decide, well, are we okay with parking if it's all behind a building, if it's screened properly?
I like the idea, one of the, maybe a gentleman behind you, about the curbs and parking spaces along the road. If you think about Richmond or some of the other places that have little coffee shops, or maybe Heinsberg, they have parking spaces right in, you could basically stop. When you come through Williston, it's unclear right now exactly where you stop. It's kind of like a drive-through, right? Because everything is kind of off the road except for maybe the town. I guess you can see some parking in the town offices next to the armory. But even the school is kind of set back, right? And the library is kind of shaded, so.
It appears to us, just watching out the window every day, that a great deal of the volume of vehicle traffic through the village is during the AM and PM peaks, not surprisingly, when people are trying to get somewhere. And they may not honestly even have built time into their schedule to stop. But we also know that the civic buildings here in the village, the library, the town hall, et cetera, and the school attract a great deal of their own energy. And if you can provide folks who are coming for one of those things with one or two other opportunities that they might take advantage of from time to time, that could be really valuable. And so, you know, we hold the coffee shop idea out there not just because we really like coffee in the planning office, which we do, but because it's an indicator species, a different sort of environment, and a sort of meaningfulness of place. When people say, oh, I'll go to the village and have a cup of coffee, that someone might choose that over some other location might be valuable.
So my last question is just on this framework you have. I forget there was a name for it at the end here. But,
this is the implementation table?
Yeah, the framework is basically it's just a framework, and the details behind this will be approved as you come out with the actual plan, right?
Correct. So
these are just ideas, kind of goals.
Each of these numbered items in the list corresponds to a paragraph in the plan that goes into a little more detail, but almost all of those paragraphs direct the town, mostly through the planning office and committees, the P&Z staffs, to identify or take on some particular aspect of this and present solutions back to you eventually, for the most part. Sometimes it means working with VTrans because we do have a state highway here, or working with the business community on economic development type ideas, but much of it comes back here as policy.
So you hit upon my one question with the village is, what is VTrans' role in this? Or if I could ask it maybe differently, is having a state highway running through the middle of the village kind of a barrier to achieving those goals? Does it put limitations on it, or is it actually maybe a benefit in some ways? I'm trying to just figure that piece out.
Well, it certainly puts maybe some limitations on the configuration of the road. You know, VTrans has an obligation to operate the road to move people and goods safely and efficiently. But, you know, we've seen examples over and over again. Those street parking spaces in Heinsberg in front of the Bristol Bakery that's in Heinsberg, it's really stunning to me when I saw those go in, and I asked the Heinsberg planner, you know, VTrans was okay with parallel parking right on the state highway like that? And they said, yeah, you know, we worked it out. If you've driven through Danville on Route 2 and seen all of the traffic calming and all of the streetscape work that was done there, that's a state highway just like this. And as a more local example, you know, several generations of our own comprehensive plan have identified the climbing lane that approaches the village from Southridge Road for removal and reworking of that pavement to provide bike lanes. We just confirmed again, because we keep asking, because we're not sure it's really going to happen, and we're told, yes, that climbing lane will go away next summer as part of the repave, and that road section will be restriped to accommodate bicycles and hopefully help calm traffic as it comes up in the village. That's V-Trans agreeing to do something that the town has said is important to us. So, V-Trans would be happy to give a piece of state highway to Williston to have and hold and pay to maintain forever and ever. And, Bruce can tell you all about his South Burlington experiences of having things in the city that used to be state highway. You do get a little more say over what you do with it, but you also get a lot of responsibility. So I don't see it as a big barrier to a lot of what we're talking about in here, but it is a lot of that streetscape, most of it interacts with V-Trans's right-of-way for sure.
Okay, very good. And then the other question is with the concept of the archaeological compliance with, I guess, where the state is going in terms of, I assume, statute. And I'm just trying to get an understanding of what does this mean in terms of somebody trying to develop a piece of land. I'm just trying to get a sense of the impact on them. And I'm not disagreeing, I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, it depends a little bit on what kind of zoning bylaw tools the select board might consider adopting at some point. I would generally look at archaeological resource like a lot of our other natural resources that our bylaw protects, where outside of our growth center, almost all of our subdivisions have some kind of open space element. And where that open space is placed on the subject parcel is supposed to be under our bylaw, informed by the location of all of these different resource areas. So in part, archaeological resources could just come in as another element of, what's on the map for the resources that are on the land when you're making those decisions. And it's kind of like viewshed, where you might have really, really important viewshed resources, and you might have forest land that maybe it's deer wintering area, but maybe we're going to take a look at it and it really isn't, and we really want to protect that viewshed on that particular parcel. Similarly, you might have a parcel where some of it's viewshed and some of it's got really important archaeological resources where you say, we really need to stay out of that area in this case, and we would seek help from the state in identifying those, just like we do for other resource areas. So it's another element that gets thrown into the mix and into the balancing test when someone's considering development or a piece of work that might impact something. We look at it on our own townland as we're trying to lay out a trail. Do we want to cross through more wetland buffer, or do we want to cross through an area where there's archaeological resource? Sometimes you might have an area with archaeological resource where all it's saying is you need to study it further before you go in and impact it. We've encountered that with our trails. So as much as anything for the private side, it's identifying another resource that, either if they're at the local level, now it's going to be addressed. If they are going to go for an Act 250 permit, now they know about it that much sooner because they know about it going through local review.
Okay.
Yep.
If there are no more comments or questions from the board, a motion would be in order to adopt.
I move to amend Chapter 13 of the Town Comprehensive Plan and adopt the Village Master Plan as an appendix.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion?
Nice job, thank you.
Very good job.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, Matt.
Great, thank you.
So let's move on to the Lake Iroquois permit denial. Chris Conant is here, I believe, and I'm not sure if you've got anybody else with you tonight, but that's you. Welcome again.
Thanks for hosting me once again, another time. Just give you a little bit of history and to the benefit of the viewers. As president of the Lake Iroquois Association, I am coming in front of you tonight to talk to you mainly about the denial of the herbicide permit that Lake Iroquois Association received from the state of Vermont about a month ago, and give you a little history about Lake Iroquois for the viewers. We're 241 acres lake that's been around for over 130 years and been enjoyed by the residents of the town of Williston, town of Heinsberg, town of Richmond, town of St. George, and because of the federal monies that were used back when the Lake Iroquois Recreation District was formed, the beach and public land is now used by anybody that comes down the road, so it's great. I happen to be a resident, lifelong resident of the lake. I've been there for 60 years, actually, my family has. And so a lot of passion goes into me sitting in front of you tonight. We have been dealing with a Eurasian milfoil weed problem for the last 30 years, and it's become more apparent in the last dozen years that it has become such a nuisance that we've had to put methods in place, controls in place to deal with it. And one of the methods that we were applying for was to use a herbicide called Sonar, or the chemical is called Floridone, and that has been commonly used in the state of Vermont throughout the last 10 years in various lakes and reservoirs, and permitted by the state of Vermont, by DEC and Natural Resources. We worked hand in hand with the state of Vermont in the permit process. We have 13 board members on our board. Our membership consists of approximately 70 members that either live on the lake or reside somewhere around Lake Iroquois. And so 13 of us represent the group on the board of directors. And so back in 2016, we applied for a permit with the state of Vermont. And we used or requested that the town of Williston be the co-applicant in that process so that we would be able to both align ourselves with a municipality, but also come to the benefit of being able to avoid a fairly healthy permit application fee. And so Rick and your town office had agreed with us and with your blessing, the select board's blessing, to co-apply with us. And that was back in 2016. Unfortunately, after working 2 years with the state and what we felt was a very good application process, we were denied the opportunity back in October. Pretty frustrating because at the same time, we waited almost 2 years to get a response from that application process, which was unprecedented. That was what we felt was unacceptable. And the state has shifted gears in using herbicide in the lakes, or at least using Sonar in the lakes. They had been using both Renovate herbicide and Sonar herbicide in various lakes around the state for the last 10 years. But this was the first time in Chittenden County that a lake had requested the use of Sonar or Floridone. And so after months and months of waiting, we finally got the opportunity to be denied. And so we are here in front of you tonight to strongly support our endeavors of working on not appealing that application process. And we, as a board, had unanimously decided that we would not appeal the denial. And the reason why we asked for the denial instead of the state recommended that we withdraw our permit. The reason why we asked for the denial is so that we could be transparent and really find out what was being shared amongst the state in that lengthy 2-year application process. A number of individuals came forward at a meeting in Heinsberg that created probably the conflict of the denial, and shared many, many concerns, which we appreciated. But it was unfortunate that it took 2 years for us to actually get the denial from the state. So here we are. We're coming in front of you, strongly recommending that you support our denial of the application, because you are co-applicants on the town of Williston is co-applicant. In the meantime, we have spent many, many, many hours in various programs during the last 5 years, trying to both in educating our landowners in and around the lake, educating users in and around the lake with boaters, and we've developed a greeter program, which, as you all know, we've asked, and you've generously financially supported with us and the town of Heinsberg to build that greeter program, plus funds that we've gotten from the state. And the greeter program is basically on weekends, we inspect boats and we look for any invasive species, which right now I believe that there's identified 50 some odd invasive species in and amongst the lakes in Vermont. So we're trying to prevent all of those from coming into Lake Iroquois. Our main concern has been that we're trying to prevent more in milfoil coming into the lake. And so we look at, because of finances, we have hired staff to work on a greeter program on Saturdays and Sundays, which is mainly when most of the boats come into the lake. And we identify any problem areas. We now have a boat wash station, which we're using hot water pressure washer to wash boats. And we've prevented problems coming into the lake. And this is our 3rd year on the program, and I really appreciate the fact that I can tell you that your funds have really been successful in helping us prevent any further problems. It doesn't mean the problem's going to go away. It just means that we could help acerbate the future problems down the road. With that, we've inspected over 1,100 boats just on those 2 days a week. We're hoping that this year we'll be able to use, again, federal and state funds, municipal matches, to add a 3rd day and add Friday to our greeter program, which we then would inspect more boats. And if we can do that, that's going to help prevent any problems. We also have utilized funds to have a program funded that's called DASH, and that's Diver Assisted Suction Harvesting. We have spent over $20,000 this summer on hiring divers to come into the lake to pull weeds. Unfortunately, it's a bit controversial because of the fact that you're not only pulling milfoil, you're pulling a lot of other weeds too that help with the ecological balance of the lake. There is also a problem when you pull the weeds that you're breaking off pieces and they self-pollinate or self-propagate and end up creating more of a problem. So we feel it's a bit of a controversy, but at the same time, our hands are tied to coming in dealing with this weed problem. And so $20,000 this summer, I'm going to give you a guess at maybe probably controlling less than 5 acres of weed problem. We are 241 acres of lake, and we're dealing with over 70% of the lake is infested with milfoil. And so that's a big number, big nut to crack. But we're not gonna give up, because we need to. I'm gonna tell you, because of growing up on the lake and, growing up right next to the beach, thousands of users this summer, obviously, with the weather being as nice. The boat traffic was greater than it ever has been. Kayaks, canoes, motorboats, great. We have a 200-acre recreation district that's in back of, off BB Lane that is used every day of the week, year-round. And you've heard me talk about that many a times. It's amazing what opportunity we have as far as natural resources and recreation use. I don't want to let this lake die, nor does the other 70 members of the Lake Iroquois Association, some of which support weed control by chemical, some of which don't. We're well in tune to who does not want using a chemical in the lake. We appreciate that. We're working hard to help come up with an opportunity to take care of this problem. I come in front of you tonight to bless our decision to deny to accept the denial and not appeal the process, so that we can move forward at least in another direction. We're going to continue to look for opportunities, and I'll be honest with you, there is another chemical that the EPA has just approved and that the state of Vermont is looking at called, it's called Procellacor, and it's, there are 6 lakes in Vermont right now that have applied for the use of it during the 2019 season. And the state of Vermont is going to be looking at the opportunity of using that herbicide in the lake. We're not going to apply for any permit at this point because we feel that we need to let things settle down, redirect our energies, and be able to move forward with a decision in the next 2 years. In the meantime, we're going to continue our DASH program. We're going to continue our greeter program. We're going to continue our education program, both with our landowners and also work with people like the town of Williston. Right now, we're enjoying a opportunity to look at BB Lane and the restructuring of BB Lane to help mitigate some of the phosphorus runoff. And so we've gotten funds. Bruce Hoare has worked with us and one of our board members, and we've gotten funds for a initial project phase to look at restructuring that road. That's a big piece of phosphorus runoff into the lake. We've been testing water quality for 40 years, I was told by the initial tester, Chip Wright, back at our last meeting. So since 1980, we've been testing the waters of Lake Iroquois, which is really important to us because that's identifying how we're reducing our phosphorus runoff with our programs that we have developed in the last 15 years or 12 years with the board. So I'm here to ask of your consideration, and I know it's a little odd, but you are applicant with us, and the board has unanimously decided that we would not pursue a appeal during this process.
Thank you very much. So it's my understanding that if we take no action tonight, we'll not be appealing it. If we took some positive action that said we would appeal it, we would need a motion to do that tonight. Questions for Chris?
So
So I had a question in your, sounds like you're doing a great job with your inspections and boat wash. How do you keep the boat wash, residue from ending up back, in the lake?
We do it on the opposite side of the, there's a green space.
Right.
We're up on the road at the greeter station. And so there's quite a space between the lake and the road where we're washing the boats. But we also are pulling the milfoil out of the water during the 4 weeks that we had. So we're bringing literally trailer loads of milfoil up onto that same road with a dump trailer. And so we collect it at the station and then try to mitigate any problems right there. And so to answer your question, Teresa, I think the combination of all that, once the milfoil dries out, it's not going to self-propagate. So we've created an area that we dump the milfoil in a pile and let it deteriorate and then bury it and then reseed over the top of it each year. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Further questions for Chris?
Just real quick, and I think I might have seen it, so maybe I can ask for a very quick summary of what was the denial based on from DEC?
Basically, I would say that the denial was that there was a number of concerns of health, even though it had been, the application process had been approved in other lakes in Vermont. I think the state had a very direct decision to, with management change, to shift away from using that chemical in any opportunity, any lakes. And we being one of many, with the people that did come in front of the board to dispute it, they felt that it was necessary to take a shift change. And so I hope that answers your question, Jeff.
That's good, thank you. The next question, I guess question is, so for the foreseeable future, the benthic, did I say that word right? Benthic mats in
Yep.
Dash are
Our opportunities, that's correct.
opportunities. Are you ruling out the use of some sort of herbicides in the future, or just not in the foreseeable future because of?
We are pursuing every opportunity that we possibly can in the future. We just don't know about this particular new herbicide that is going to be available. I'm not going to tell you that we may come in front of you and ask you again to co-apply with us. But at the same time, we really are taking our time to work through this program. It's controversial. You know how controversial it can be, any use of chemical is, but this particular chemical has been fast-tracked with the state of Vermont to be considered to use because there is such a milfoil problem in so many lakes in the state of Vermont, and we're just one of many. And, a bit of me is frustrated because these are state waters. Lake Iroquois is state waters, and, it really should be a practice that the state comes in and takes responsibility for this, but they're not doing that, and they're not doing that in any lakes. And in our case, it took them 2 years to make a decision on this process. That's a bit frustrating for us, because we worked right here in this building for almost a year with the state to help build that program. It wasn't something that we just decided, let's use this chemical. and then all of a sudden there was a management change, shift change, and a direction change. And we,
So Seclicor is
Yeah.
being fast-tracked? That's the-
Procellacor
Procellacor.
is the new herbicide that is being considered by the state of Vermont at this point, that we've been told by different people in
It's
the
being,
state.
you heard it's being fast-tracked.
One of the things before we end our conversation that I would like to propose, and I don't need an answer tonight, Williston has been so generous to help us throughout our whole process, whether it's Rick's office and Eric dealing with, working with the greeter program, and, we've aligned ourselves now with Williston, Richmond, Heinsberg, and St. George. But we've also aligned ourselves hand in hand with LIRD, the Lake Iroquois Recreation District. We're working with them on many different programs. We would like to create a stakeholders group that is going to develop a direction with us. And that stakeholders group is going to include, I hope, the state of Vermont, Agency of Natural Resources, the DEC, but also members of our communities that are surrounding the lake, and Williston being one of them. And I know that LARD is part of this process. We've got Jeff Davis, who lives in Heinsberg, that's part of Lake Iroquois Recreation District Board, but he's also on our board. But I would like to see us develop a group of people, and it doesn't have to be a select board member, because I know how busy each of you are. But I would love to see you consider at one point appointing an individual that can work with us as part of the stakeholders group. And so that 2 years from now, if we've got a direction that we've dotted all of our I's and crossed our T's and made sure that everybody is informed, and I think that would make a big impact in this decision-making process as we move forward. So I throw that up in the air, and stay tuned. I really would love to see this happen, so.
And so, if there's no interest in pursuing an appeal, it looks like there's not, then we can conclude this one tonight, and thank you very much, Chris.
Yeah.
And we're in the process of starting the budget process
Yep.
in
Yep.
December, so we're looking for your.
We haven't touched base too much on it. I think what we've done in the past is we've asked for $2,500 for the greeter program match from each community, that we can then, try to work with money that we get from other grant programs. And then we were thinking about asking for another $2,500 from each community to use for additional milfoil control in and around the beach area and the access area. So I'll just throw it out, and then I'll have a formal request to Rick here in the next couple weeks. Okay?
Thank you very much.
And thanks again for all your effort, and we appreciate the support that you continue to give us.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Let's move on to the Chittenden Community Television Annual Report. And we have Lauren Thunderician, the Executive Director, with us tonight, and looks like somebody else as well. So,
Good evening. We have Dan Logan with us. He's our Channel Director. Coordinator. So many titles. He's our Channel Coordinator. Megan Orwork is our Channel Director. Aiden, of course, is man of all trades. Good evening, everyone. First, I'd just like to start out by thanking Eric for the effort that he's made in producing the Williston program. And what's the name of it?
What's Up, Williston?
What's Up, Williston, that's right.
Hit the latest episode this morning.
Exactly. And he just brings huge enthusiasm to the work of Williston and the work of media making, and we're really very lucky to have him we wish every community had an Eric, because it's just a pleasure. No, I'm sure you don't want to let him go. So again, just to recap for the viewers and for yourselves, we sent you out a memo, which I think you may have had a chance to read, and if you have any questions, we'd be very happy to answer those. As you know, we try to come annually to visit with you. Channel 17 has been in operation since 1990, and this election season, that makes it something like our 42nd election season, if you add all the town meetings and all the general elections, not even the primaries. So this is a very exciting time, and over the past month, we've covered about 31 races, including Williston's state house race, and over 100 candidates have appeared at Channel 17 just for October. We have started, as you know, in the last year and a half, to cover your meetings live. And I think what's interesting about that is that the regular viewership is sort of steadily increasing, but more importantly, when there's something of great significance to the community, people are tuning in I think, significant numbers, not only to the live YouTube coverage, but to the archives, where we, on channel17.tv. So we also, I just wanted to also mention that on YouTube, you've got now the transcripts. So you can search the meetings by transcript there's a little box. So that's a great feature. A lot of people find that quite useful. But the bigger picture that I wanted to address with you tonight is that, as you know, over the past, since 1990, since we started, we've been aware that cable revenue was going to erode, and the last 18 months has really been the time where cable revenue is starting not only to plateau, but to decline. And this has been exacerbated by a fairly big adjustment that Comcast made in January of this year. According to their accountants, they had to reclassify some revenue. And this was a GAAP decision. It was a one-time adjustment, but it resulted in about a $50,000 decrease in revenue for Channel 17, and also for RATN and VCAM, respectively, the other two, the public and the educational access operations. So we've been assured that that adjustment was a one-time thing. And in order to address it, we are coming to request that you consider in your budget process increasing the contribution that Williston makes to Channel 17, which is currently $6,000, and increasing that to $12,000. And if taken together, if each of the member communities were able to do that, which we would consider to be quite generous, we would be able to offset that fairly significant gap. In terms of the overall revenue kind of plateauing and steady decline, it's like 0.5%, a quarter. It's sort of steadily going down due to cable cord cutting. We're addressing that and augmenting that with annual campaign and membership drives along the lines of what you might see in Vermont Public Radio. So we're changing and adapting our revenue model. We haven't raised lots of money that way in the past, but we're getting quite focused, and our goal is to start to really significantly increase fundraising in that way as well. And that will help offset our operating and capital needs, which, as you know, we're delivering, I think, great value for the work that we do, but it's a very capital-intensive business, as you can imagine. So, happy to answer any questions on the memo that we gave you. Dan, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, wait till we field some questions.
Great.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate what Channel 17 does for us, and it helps our third-party secretary to give us some good minutes as well. And I think all of us have appeared before a campaign time at the station one time or another. Questions for Lauren?
How many communities do you support?
So the service area, the Comcast service area in this region is 7 communities. So it's Burlington, South Burlington, Essex and Essex Junction, Williston, Winooski, Colchester, part of Colchester, small part of Colchester, a few hundred subscribers, and also St. George.
Thank you. Is there any way to get, to understand what our viewership is for the Williston programming?
So we have internal web numbers, which I didn't have ready for you for this memo. We have the YouTube numbers, but we don't have any way of knowing how many cable subscribers tune in. We sort of extrapolate. Comcast won't even share the number of cable subscribers in the service area anymore with us. We're going to try to pursue that because your allocation of resources are essentially based on the number of subscribers you have relative to the other members. You know, we don't think those have changed dramatically, but in the past, we received those numbers in order to make sure we were providing service and representation in an equal way. But Comcast is very closed now about the information that they'll share. So we don't know. What we do know is that when there, as I've mentioned before, when there is an event of significance, people tune in. And we also know that the more municipalities help spread the word, which I think Williston gives its very best effort, the more we're able to build audience.
If I can just add on that as
Please
well.
do, yeah.
We don't have any way of telling when we have more all-encompassing programming like the senator race or any of the big forums that we hold for the elections. When we break it down into YouTube, we don't really have any idea of where those viewers lie. So there would be presumably a significant amount from Williston of the 400, 500, 600 people that we have tuned into those as well.
And I imagine people say to you, oh, I saw you on them, right? I mean, so it's very hyper-local. I'm reluctant to use that word, but that's the case, is that it's extremely granular media to the community that it serves. We were just in Winooski this evening, and, you know, essentially they have this similar experience to you. People come up to them and say, oh, I saw you. Oh, you're doing this. Oh, I'm not so, I mean, it's a really important gesture to open the doors, and it's also really important for the community to be able to see and then engage back.
Also worth noting, both presenters before us at both meetings referenced the viewers and how important it was for them to get their message out to the viewers beyond just the people in the room.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't have complete in the question that you're asking, but anecdotally we know.
I understand. So thank you for answering, you know, the best you can. I mean, I'm always looking for how we can get more participation from the public. It's one of my things I'm always looking for, because you can see in the room here, we don't have a lot of residents sitting in the room beyond staff in Williston. So I don't know if it's through, I've been asking Eric for his help, and I know Eric's doing, you know, his part in doing his own show here for Williston. But maybe we could advertise Front Porch Forum or one of the other places. Maybe it's on our Facebook page. I don't use Facebook, so I have a Facebook account, don't really use it anymore. But I don't know if there's a way to advertise this, because again, maybe people just, you know, for whatever reason, don't want to get out of the house, especially in the winter months or the long budget meetings we're going to have coming up.
That's a good thought. I've done some link sharing, and everything's shared on the town YouTube channel from CCTV's YouTube channel, but certainly try it with a little more frequency too, and some different.
This has got to be more interesting than about 95% of cable programming right now. So they've gotten really lazy in cable programming. So
I think also
the unreality.
Yeah, this is
decade.
real reality television.
Exactly right.
And I think that when there are issues that people, I mean, you always hear from people when they're not happy. They're here. They come, right? I mean, I imagine page 2, the folks in Lake Iroquois are going to be interested in that presentation, and they may be watching it tonight, or they may go and watch it later on. So there are ways, I think, to work with the individuals who come here and ask them to promote things, and maybe that's something we could, we'll talk with Eric a little bit more, maybe, and brainstorm some innovative marketing, because that's a question we have also. But we find that once people start paying their taxes, that's when they start really caring about what goes on in their municipal government. you know. I mean, you say, oh, could we get more 20-year-olds watching Channel 17? Well, you could, but until they're really paying the tab, they're not going to be paying too much attention.
Further questions?
Quick question. You mentioned the 6,000 annual contribution to town lakes. Could you, well, I guess maybe this might be a question for Eric and Rick. Is that based on, I assume that's out of the annual budget, operating budget? Yes. Is that based on a formula, or is that, okay, so there's a formula used to make requests to each of the member town, or not member, but each of the towns you serve?
Yeah, so this is the formula that is the foundation of all formulas.
Okay. The earth was built on this formula.
The trustees, the trust of Channel 17 was built on this formula, and it was based on the subscriber numbers. So essentially, Burlington gets 6 meetings a month. South Burlington gets 5 meetings a month, and the other communities get 3 meetings a month. So that was based on the distribution. So so your formula in Williston is the same as Essex and Essex Junction and Winooski. So those communities are each right now paying $6,000 into the pot. Burlington is paying $12,000 into the pot, and South Burlington is paying $10,000 into the pot. Okay. So you can see how the math is working there. So we're asking all the communities to double their contribution.
Okay, good, great, thank you.
So it's not based on population or?
Subscribers. Cable subscribers. So it's a function of cable subscriber revenue, in effect, because cable subscribers of Williston are contributing. So they get a service that's sort of commensurate with their numbers.
I missed the part about the meetings per month, the 3, 6, what does that mean?
So those are based on the original, actually probably the most recent analysis was in the mid-2000s of how many subscribers each community had. And so Burlington's is by far like 1.5 times what everyone else's is, at least South Burlington. And then the other communities are roughly the same, however many those are. They used to add up to 30,000.
Okay. Thank you.
So that was how we allocated votes on the trustees and production services. It was based on the subscriber breakdown.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you so much for coming
Yes.
tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck tomorrow. Those results.
Let's go on to errors and omissions for 2018. Dick Ransom, Assistant Assessor, is here, and it looks to me like we probably can skip the first almost 3 pages and go directly
Right to the last 3
changes.
that impact dollars, that's correct.
Yeah, just go on to that has money related to it. But that might be at the bottom of page 3.
Yeah, it starts with ID 14-104, 082, 013, Kimberly, yeah. And what we try to do with errors and omissions, again, it's based upon factual information, square footage, possibly a labeling, which would affect a labeling of a segment within a sketch that could affect the square footage. So that's what we tend to key in on if someone does come in after grievances, and we will sit and discuss their situation, and we always let them know that it's factual. Some are not significant. The first 2 are quite small, a couple $1,000s on Kim Baroni's property. It was a new structure, and we had a labeling problem with that one. The second one was an older construction that somewhere along the line, the sketch was mislabeled with all 2-story, and it should have been 1.5, and we agreed that we should change that this year. The last one was the solar sense. The file ID is to be determined. That was a new parcel for a 500 kilowatt solar array facility on the Fontaine property on North Williston Road. And the communication between Bill and I guess, went south. or north, wherever, and we missed it, and we discovered we had done so. So, and that number of $835,620 is their number. So I don't think, that's not a number that we created, that was their number that they sent to us in the letter that we missed. So the net effect, I think on one page at the end, and again, that one is taxed only at the municipal level. The state collects the education funds in another format for solar at this point in time. So the net effect of the municipal tax impact is $2,189.94 to the good.
Any questions for Dick on any of these?
No, I just want to make sure I understand. I'm sure you explained it just great, but the net impact is a positive.
Positive,
in
yeah.
terms of revenue coming in.
Into the, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. And we'll be sending out new tax bills shortly.
So a motion would be in order.
I move to approve the corrections of the 2018 grand list as proposed by the listers.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
So now we go on to line item transfers, and Jennifer, I believe you're going to talk about this one and the next one as well. Good, so line item transfers, and we do have a memo from you on this.
So line item transfers, something that we do every year about this time. When we budget for merit increases or any union negotiation dollars, we always put that in the manager's budget under discretionary wages. And then this time of year, I come to you and say, this is how we'd like to allocate those funds within the different departments. Most of these increases are the 2% increases for all town staff that happened on July 1st. That was in addition to the cost of living increase. This was a merit increase granted by the town manager with select board approval. We budgeted a wage increase for the fire department of 3%, was in their actual budget. After the union negotiations, that increase ended up being 6%. So this is an additional 3% that we have in here. Something that we'd like to do effective November 24th is increase the starting wage for our public works crew. We've gotten the most recent wage data from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns wage survey that they do, and we're very far behind. We have 2 open positions right now, and rather than hire those positions at a lower wage, we'd like to post that job at the higher, the new increased wage. And in order to make that fair for the employees that have been here for multiple years, is we're increasing wages for 5% for all employees in that department. We still will have some work to do in the budget process, but this is what we felt like we could do now with those discretionary dollars.
So questions for Jennifer on the proposals?
So this is the first time we're contemplating this highway and water sewer technician salary increase.
This is the first time we have, and first time in the couple years that I've been here. Last year, we did do a wage analysis. That is not one of the positions that we looked at. And this year we are looking.
So when you say we're behind, what does it mean? When you say we're way behind, what quantitative, what does that mean?
Sure, our starting wage is $16.20 an hour right now, and the starting wage, average starting wage is about $18 an hour for those same positions.
So this is all about making our wages competitive so that we can...
So we don't lose people to other towns. I'm doing the same job in the next town over for this.
But a 5%'s not even going to get to the average rate?
It's not getting us there, and that's why
it's not even $1, right?
It's moving that wage up to $17 an hour.
Right.
Yeah, and so we hope through the budget process we can move closer to that. We will be doing, a merit increase, a cost of living next year as well, and seeing what that additional gap is.
Do we have any concept of a total compensation package, value of a total compensation package? That we look at comparative, so we can compare to other places rather than just salary?
We did
Just
that
wondering
in,
for our budget, maybe not for tonight, but maybe for our budget process.
sure, we did that in great detail for the fire union negotiation. I think we shared that with you as well. But yeah, looking at that whole amount, it's about 30%, our benefits are about 30% of salary, or an additional 30% value, yeah.
What you're suggesting is has a lot of value. The problem is it's extraordinarily difficult we can calculate our own, but then to look at every town has a different mix, and it's not quite as easy.
Maybe we should ask the League of Cities and Towns to help us with that.
At one point, they did do an analysis for a limited number of communities, and they charged extra for that service. It was not part of their regular service.
I was just wondering with the reading ahead a little bit, the healthcare costs didn't go up, maybe not as much as I expected, but still, they're continuing on their meteoric rise.
Yes, in general.
I think they did provide that information in this year's survey. We just got that a little over a week ago, and so I haven't really dug into it that much, but I think they did ask us for a lot of benefit information. So, and they were trying to ask for it in a consistent way so that we could compare ourselves against other towns, but I haven't had a chance to dig into that.
But they're comparing the type of benefit, not necessarily the cost. So that's the tricky part, is marrying those two up.
Just so at the end of the day, we're comparing apples to apples, right? Total package like you did for the union employees, so I think it's a valid way to look at things.
Further questions for Jennifer? Again, a motion would be in order.
I move that to approve the proposed line item transfers as outlined in the memo dated October 26th, 2018.
Second.
Discussion on the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Speaking of health insurance, we're moving on to the health insurance plan renewal for 2018. Again, Jennifer.
I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do this again, so I'm just going to take a moment to say I'm asking that we are moving to a plan that has less cost for our taxpayers. It's not very often that we get to do that, but we are currently enrolled in the gold plan from Blue Cross Blue Shield. And this year, once again, for that same plan within the exchange, they increased the premium a small amount, 3%, but then they increased the deductibles again, that happened to us last year. And that's very costly for the town, especially with our union contracts. If the deductible goes up, that HRA funding that the town does also goes up, so the town covers that difference. For our town employees, we don't have that in place, so town employees would then be required to pick up that difference, which is about $250 for a single plan and $500 for a family plan. So we worked with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, their health advisory insurance services, or health insurance advisory services, and they shared with us two plans that are available that we qualify for as a group. And the one that is the most like what we have right now is the one that's offered through Business Resource Services. So with that plan, we can stay in still a gold consumer-directed high deductible plan. It does not offer the blue rewards, but it is a very comparable plan. There's one small difference in the plan, and we can have lower premium rates for our employees who contribute to that amount, plus the town picks up a large portion of that premium, and our deductible rates stay the same, which was a huge bonus. So we are asking to move to this plan. Over the course of a calendar year,
It is about a $40,000 savings to the town. 20,000 of that we'll see in this fiscal year. 20,000 of it will be in next fiscal year. And I'll walk through that during the budget process of what that looks like for next fiscal year.
Questions?
So can I ask, if I look at the premium for a single person at $625 a month, that's approximately 20% of what we're paying the salary. So a large chunk of that 30% of the cost of employing people, right, in terms of benefits?
Absolutely, yes.
How does, when you go to two people and a family, does our town, do we pay for that as well, minus 10%, which the employee pays? So do we pay 100% of that?
Yes.
So for two people, it's $12.51 a month. We charge the employee or the employee's tax 10%, $125.
Yes.
So that person gets double the benefits.
Yes.
Wow. So that would be like 40%. But we somehow, through the demographics of the entire staff, we only have an overhead for all benefits on top of salary of only, of course, only 30%, because the higher paid employees, this is a smaller percentage. So this would only be against, so most of our employees then are higher paid than. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just figuring out the math in my head, so.
And some employees choose to opt out of our insurance.
Really? Yeah.
And we do pay them a monthly stipend for not being on our plan. But yeah, there's about 14 people right now that are not on our plan.
How much, what's the stipend we give them?
It varies. Town employees are at $250 a month. Police union is at $500 a month, and fire union was just negotiated at $600 a month.
We're going to be changing the town employee stipend up to the police amount shortly.
So we give the employees that money if they don't use our insurance?
And they need to have proof of insurance with someone else. They can't be part of the exchange on their own, getting a discount from the state. They have to be part of another plan. So if my husband has a plan, I can be on his plan. I have to show the town that I have that insurance and a copy of that insurance card.
Okay.
But the rates, Teresa, that we are going to are lower than that $625. So if you look on the second page there, the BRS association rates are the rates that we would be eligible for this year.
That's the, that's on the same page, isn't it, just the next column?
There's 2 pages of this report.
Front and back.
Oh, I was looking at page 2 anyway, maybe.
Oh, okay, great.
It goes from 625 to 598.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
that's what I
those
was
are the-
looking at.
yes, yes,
That was
yes.
already on page 2. Okay.
Yeah, and so there is, for the 2-person plan, the premium is going down from what we would have had to pay.
That's a good discount.
About 15%.
Thank you.
The adult-child aspect of the BRS association rates?
They don't have that rate, so if you are a 2-person, if you're an adult and 1 child, you move to a 2-person plan. If you're an adult and more than 1 child, you are a family. And right now, we don't have anyone that would move from an adult and child plan to a family. We don't have anyone that's in that situation.
To me, this is not a negative comment or anything like that, but it's a little bit odd that somebody like BRS would I shouldn't say would offer this, but people are going to join that association, they get the group, whatever, simply to get the insurance. Maybe not simply, but that's the primary. Is that common? Is that
Yeah. And that's the option that we have because we are a group. With the exchange rate, any person can opt into the exchange. A single person can opt into that exchange, whereas in a group plan, you have people that have different experience with health insurance, so they can offer a lower rate.
We've actually purchased insurance through that association in the past.
Oh, we have?
Yes.
Okay. I did not realize that aspect of it. You actually join an organization, so you get access to those insurance products, if you will.
And actually, we fairly recently joined the Chamber of Commerce, and they have another, that's a separate group, and we could have bought insurance to them, but the problem with their plan is that the deductible is going up the same rate as the exchange.
My last question is are we getting in front of the budget by, when we approve this, are we approving a budget line item for the next year ahead of time? By
yes and no. The enrollment period, we have to have everyone enrolled before January 1st. So we are, yeah, so
for our budget.
Right, exactly, because it splits years, and that's why Jennifer said the savings is maybe 40,000, but we're only going to gain 20,000 in the current fiscal year, which you already have budgeted, and the other 20,000 is for the next year. But then we don't know what the increase will be January 1st, 2020. So it's always kind of a.
Thank you.
So we are hoping to use some of those savings that we have this year to do some in-house wellness initiatives to keep people thinking about, because that's what the Blue Rewards program was. You received a card from Blue Cross that they would load money onto if you completed different wellness activities. And so we want to try to keep that momentum toward wellness going here townwide.
So if there's no more questions, there is a suggested motion.
I'd move to authorize the town manager to sign the Business Resource Services Group enrollment agreement to offer the Blue Cross Blue Shield consumer-directed health plan to eligible employees effective January 1, 2019.
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Moving on to, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Moving on to traffic calming policy. We postponed discussion of this from the last time, but I think there's only a few differences in what we've seen before. Eric, I think you're going to talk a little about that.
Yep. So after our last discussion, the board asked to have the town attorney review and provide some feedback, especially looking at liability that may be written into this. New town attorney Bob Fletcher has reviewed, and he reports back to us. Policy in its current state does not raise any legal concerns. He informs staff the policy in its current state does not explicitly impose liability for failure to adhere to its provisions or attempt to regulate anything other than the decision-making process around traffic calming. Has some additional comments from Mr. Fletcher took under advisement in this latest red line version. You'll see notably section 1.3 that's been added in. I want to reiterate that nothing in this policy is meant to or will diminish or interfere with the select board's authority and responsibilities under Vermont law to control town highways. Ultimately, we're looking at having collaboration and good dialogues with these communities, but the powers of the select board fall to regulate town highways. So we don't want to have anything appear in this policy that would differ from that. And along those lines, with Mr. Fletcher's suggestions, trying to make sure there's language in here that doesn't look that someone could perceive that some of those powers of the board were being taken by residents being involved in this. We certainly want them to be involved and have dialogues, but it's the select board's final decision of how to control town highways. So
That's why I thought it was, so, were you done? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah.
So I actually read, when I was reading this again for the, I don't know, third or fourth time, I got the impression that maybe some of the language gives that impression in here. So I was kind of wondering whether, there were three things I was wondering about. So one is, it's unclear on the processes that Bruce wrote, how the select board gets involved in deciding if an engineering study should be done, rather than just Bruce and the residents, because throughout this process, it talks about coalitions and homeowners associations. And by the way, homeowners associations, if it's anything like ours, the one I'm in, have no power outside of maintaining common lands and facilities. In our case, the pump station. It was the stormwater pond until recently. Thank you very much, Williston Town. But, so we get, as a homeowners association vice president, I get every time about, kids at the bus stop this morning dropped a cup of coffee and left it in the street. What are you going to do about it? It's, well, nothing. But, it's not a homeowners association thing, so neither is probably, my guess is, a lot of these things are drafted the same way. So that was in here, but should the process be more clearly articulated that, before Bruce starts talking to homeowners or groups, residential groups about things that they might have and things that they, asking them about the kinds of traffic calming things we should install or would they like, should we, as a select board, look at those things first? Otherwise, it seems like we're getting behind the 8 ball, right? He goes and meets with a coalition or a group of homeowners, says, do we want to put in speed bumps? And the way the process is written, he does all that and then comes to us for approval, and it seems a little backwards. It seems like he should come to us before doing an engineering study to make sure we agree with, the purpose or the reasoning behind the study. And then secondly, if he thinks the study warrants some kind of improvement or some list of improvements, we should review and approve those before he proposes them to residents. In that way, we're not put in this, we're not coming up against something that the town public works director has already agreed to with a bunch of residents. This is what you want to do. Let's go get it stamped by the select board. It seems like we should be part of that process. And my last comment was, it seems like we need, and this is something I brought up at the very first meeting, I just haven't seen anything come in here yet. When we see a study from Bruce, however it's done, it should have at least a few aspects in it before it comes to the select board. Definition of the problem, how effective are the solutions to the particular problem he's trying to deal with some reference, right? How, in other words, when we saw the solutions from, I forget the name of the company, Hoyle and Tanner maybe? I don't remember, to be honest. Or maybe it was a consultant, I forget. But, they come up with a bunch of different suggestions. They didn't really have anything behind those as to what, how effective they were with any reference. And the effect of the solution on the surrounding residents with references. In other words, maybe if we had something like that, the speed bumps out in front of, I forget the gentleman's name, whether those would be, would that be problematic? And the last is the effect of the solution on pedestrians and other risk users. To me, this is a small piece, but each of these should be covered in whatever he's showing to us, and that way we can make kind of an informed decision, right? We can ask the right questions, whether it's, so that's what I read, and rather than going through, I noted in the plan all the places that I found these things, but it seemed like the process was kind of doing all this stuff with the homeowners and then coming to us to get it approved after they've approved whatever things they would like to see. It seemed a little backwards, Eric. I don't know. And I know it's getting late, and you probably don't want to go line.
No, that's fine. I'm just thinking.
Did it make sense? Any of these things make sense?
Kind of what the entry point looks like for the board in this process. Is that what I'm hearing? Kind of.
Well, both the entry point for I guess from the board, so that we get, we have some headlights 1 and 2. We're going to go do engineering studies, and an XYZ neighborhood, and this is why we want to go do them, and because doing an engineering study implies we're going to spend some money and do something, so we should at least get, you know, some headlights into that and why we want to do it, and then before we, I don't want to say make commitments to homeowners because we're not, but imply we're making commitments, you know, basically meet with them on a bunch of solutions without any feedback from the board that we would agree to spend money on those. And I think the ones with the humps were maybe the same way, right? They met with homeowners, they got agreements, and then Bruce came here and asked for approval to spend money.
Well, I think that we authorized a scoping study on that.
Good. Okay, did we?
Yeah.
So maybe if we just wrote that in here, that this is the process, because it doesn't read that way.
I worry about us micromanaging, though.
Yeah. Certainly don't want to micromanage Bruce.
No, but I think that would be my only concern with adding things like that, and is that you would give that a variance.
So do we want to refer this back to staff for review and come back to us again?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with Teresa's overall point that I think the entry point for the select board should probably be a little bit earlier. I don't probably agree with the idea that the engineering alternatives should be presented to the board in huge detail as a matter of policy. Because I don't want to get into the weeds on stuff like that, basically. And it's not just that I don't want to, I don't think it's a good idea. But that being said, it sounds like it's possible, maybe it could be finessed so that the board comes in faster in the process. And then that way, you know, board members, and it won't be us forever, can, you know, if there is an inquiry that needs to be made with more detail that needs to be brought back to the board, they would have a quicker opportunity to do it.
So I know we talked about Public Works kind of defining which level of response. So if Public Works defines it as a level 3 response, that would merit a study with that staff recommendation, then having it come to the board to say, this is what we recommend doing the study for X, Y, and Z reasons, ask the board to support that, and then move forward with the study, then it would continue on with the results to be shared with the board at that point, and a path forward developed from there.
I think you would want to share the results, right? And then basically agree that it warrants some actions, and then basically giving Bruce the, okay, go ahead and discuss with residents, you know, we agree that some action should be taken, some physical action, right? Either signs or bumps or whatever the right thing. And again, I'd like you to consider, and I'm not looking for huge amount of detail, but enough that would prevent the kind of situation we had, just that he's looking at the different areas that could be trouble, right? Pedestrians, you know, what do we call those people that aren't cars using the roads? Is it at-risk users, or I forget that there's a term for
multimodal.
No, it's for people like bicyclists on the road. There's a name for the user that implies that it's a riskier use, you know, it's a at-risk kind of, they don't have a 5,000-pound metal cage around them, right? So, and the effects of, you know, on surrounding residents of the, just doesn't have to be in infinite detail, and not looking to do engineering, but just want to make sure we don't create another situation. And it, you know, can't stop everything, obviously, but we can't anticipate everything, but we can.
So, it sounds like we'll refer this back to staff to come back to us with some suggestions.
Will Bruce come at the next one? Could Bruce come as well, or is that not?
I'm not sure. I guess I don't know. We'll have to evaluate whether it's something, I mean, he's had.
I don't know if he's done this, or maybe it's Eric's.
It's actually, Bruce has done very little of this.
Oh, never mind, I'm sorry. I thought it was Bruce's, I thought Bruce was behind it.
No.
He's been consulted on various iterations of the draft,
okay.
so.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, that's fine. So
Nice piece of work, though.
Just very quickly, if I could just be clear, the input we're giving, or you're taking away from this, is to clarify where the select board kind of gets involved and at what point. Okay, good, thank you.
Work on some new language for the next draft here and look.
Great. Developing policies in Williston can be sort of a longer-term, step-by-step process, as you're probably figuring out. How long have we been working on this?
Well, it's a brand-new concept, and so I certainly understand why the board is taking its time on it. You know, just to keep in mind too, though, this is going to be, as we, just like other policies the board has adopted, as we implement them, we learn through that and make changes and adjustments. And because it's a policy, those are relatively easy to make. But these are all good points, and we'll continue to finesse it. Just hope you're not getting discouraged.
It's a process. Government's a process, right?
Moving on, manager's report.
I have three things I wanted to touch on. And the first one is the budget review schedule. I've included several different documents. One is the actual schedule showing when we would be meeting with each department. One notable piece is that this schedule, as it's presented now, would have us review all departmental budgets before the end of December. The exceptions are stormwater, water, and sewer. And there's a reason why we don't often have the rates from the parties that we buy the water from, or the sewer rates that we send the sewer to. And so we usually don't get those until late in December. So we get the budget done sooner than early January. But in any case, we would have those ready and reviewed by the select board in early January. So that gives you pretty much, an extra few weeks to provide input back to staff and have the staff respond to different questions and directions the board would like to go in on the budgets. So that's the first piece, is the schedule. I guess I'm looking for a little bit of reaction. You know, on the face of it does look significantly different, but on the other hand, there isn't a whole lot you can do with it.
We're doing it during select board meetings rather than...
Not entirely, you know, let's see, December 11th meeting is devoted entirely to budget.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're proposing to start the meeting early and run to about 9 o'clock. So we're running from 6 to 9, that meeting. And the December 4th, I should have started right from the beginning, is just an overview of the budget. It'll be 10, 15-minute overview, and that's the night you'll actually receive the document. And when I say budget, I'm talking about both capital budget and equipment fund budget and general operating budgets. Talked about December 11th. December 18th is a regular select board meeting. I am proposing to devote most of that to budget stuff, although I do have the first hour set aside for just regular agenda stuff. So we're going to have to work to make sure that we can stick to that schedule. And then we have a public hearing scheduled for January 8th. January 1st this year falls on a Tuesday, I believe.
Yes, it does.
And so this would be the first meeting after that. And that's when we would talk about our utility fund budgets and have the budget hearing at 8 o'clock. And then regular business after that. And if there's time, we can even start budget deliberations that night. Again, so that puts us early January, a week or two earlier than we've had in the past.
So we kind of almost have 3 meetings of budget, big budget meetings.
And then,
2.5 or
right.
almost 3.
Right. And then there'll be opportunities during the month of January for shorter discussions or longer, depending on which direction the board. I mean, we can, if needed, we could even schedule a special meeting in January just to talk about budgets beyond what we already have scheduled. So we have that flexibility. any,
It's a lot of stuff to go through.
yes.
It is.
As every year, but this gets us through some of this, most of this stuff earlier anyway, so we can have more time to actually concentrate on the final document.
Yeah. Although one of my goals had been to hopefully cut down on the number of meetings in December.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like it could have.
That doesn't do it, but
You could do that, but then that pushes it later into January, and the board has less time, and the staff has less time to respond to the board.
There's no possibility to do a Saturday meeting, like a long 8-hour meeting, just to.
There's a possibility.
Not with my schedule. I mean, I'd certainly consider it if that's what everybody wanted to do, but that'd be really hard.
All right.
if we were to do a Saturday meeting, I would not like to do an 8-hour meeting. Dealing with budget for 8 hours is mind-boggling.
I hear you.
It might help, though, to do a half-a-day session or something on a Saturday if it, I don't know.
Well, if you look at the December 11th meeting, that's a 3-hour meeting. And so what I think you're talking about is doing that on a Saturday, but are you talking about doing that in December?
No.
Okay, so that's...
Oh, you don't want to do it in December?
It's just a preference.
I certainly understand that because it's a busy time for all of us, but...
We're kind of out of time for this month, or? What about the last week in November?
We won't have the budget done by then.
Oh, okay.
I've just started as you heard, I had my first, Jennifer and I had our first budget review session this morning. And we've got a bunch of departments to get through, and then we've got to put it all together and make it into a cohesive document. And it's a short month. In November, we've got Veterans Day, we have 2 days off in Thanksgiving week. So it's a tough month. And we're still putting the final touches on the capital budget. We don't have that done yet either.
I suggest we go with the schedule as presented and see how it works this year, and we might want to make adjustments next year.
Sure.
Yeah, I wish there was another way around it. It's, so. All right, the other piece of this is the public input, public outreach, whichever way you want to look at it. Public engagement, I guess, may be the best term. There's I believe did I include the thing from Eric?
Yeah, I'd give them a memo in their packet.
Okay, all right, so there's a memo from Eric.
Yes.
And he outlined some concepts, including primarily doing a first step, like a survey of what people want. In other words, do they want to attend like a budget academy type thing where they learn about the budget process? Are they interested in less formal methods of communication? What are they hoping for as far as engagement in the budget? What kinds of things would they be interested in? That seemed like, to me, a good first step. I know budgets generally aren't that exciting for people. It's maybe that it's just going to be a struggle, but any reactions to what Eric's proposing?
Budget Academy. I mean, just, Budget 101 is a great idea.
Getting CEUs for it, too.
We could try that, but it's, my concern is we put a lot of effort into planning it and preparing for it and have one person show up.
Yeah, I think that's likely.
What about just further, for the Channel 17 broadcast, making sure people know when they're happening and what topics are being covered, and I don't know. Seems like we could do that every week, right? Every day we have our broadcasters here, we could advertise that. I know a lot of people are in the Front Porch Forum.
Yep.
I know a lot of people are getting away from Facebook. We just,
There's so many places to cover these days.
I know, yeah, but,
Actually, people may not be aware, there's a somewhat of a competitor Front Porch Forum called Next Door. And there are a number of people in Williston that are participating in that. It doesn't seem to be as active as Front Porch Forum, but it's similar, it has people chatting back and forth about different issues. But anyway.
So if you're looking for my input, in terms of pathway methods, the third and the fifth bullet would be where I would focus.
what's the interactive online budget? Are you talking about the pathway methods or the?
Yes.
Okay. What's the interactive online budget simulation?
There's different tools out there. That one has a cost component to it. I know there's different modules out there, maybe some different price points. I'd look to see what kind of other strategies people have used in the country for engagement. And the thought with this survey mechanism is, again, an idea what members of the community would want to engage with before we use staff resources to develop those outputs. So if we get overwhelming response on a couple of these, it shows us where to focus our energy. And then, not as opposed to kind of throw things out there, then, okay, maybe a couple people engage with this and we've used dozens of staff hours to develop it. And
Yeah, okay. I think the third bullet has the potential for a lot of input, and that's great. I also think probably a lot of that input will be very hard to figure out how to build that into the budget. The comment that says it's too expensive. It's a great comment, but it doesn't give us much direction for, okay, what do you recommend? Either doesn't get funded or what have you.
would the board be interested, there's the idea of the inputs and the outputs kind of for benchmarking this. Kind of saying we've done these different output methods, we've done A, B, and C, it reached X number of people. And then there's the way of getting people to get feedback as well. The inputs method is, the board more interested in kind of the output matrix, the input, a combination of both.
So what would be an example of an output versus an input?
I think an output just kind of one-way communication where you have a
the
flyer, a video, that kind of the closing the loop on it would be an opportunity like the mapping thing we did for the sidewalks where they could engage and provide feedback as a part of it.
Well, definitely the latter is desirable, but I'm not sure at what cost, either money-wise or time-wise, it comes at. Time-wise, from staff perspective, it comes at. But the concept of providing an input and then having town residents talk about how they react to that could be very helpful. I don't have a good example. I'm too tired right now to really think of one. But let's say in the budget we say, well, we're considering eliminating the fire department. It'd be really interesting to see, you could see where it'd be really interesting to see what the feedback coming back from that would be. That's a very facetious example. Do not hold me on that, but I'm sure it will be in the paper. It's getting that concept of where are we spending our money? Where do you think we're spending our money well, and where are we not doing that? Of course, usually when they tell us where we're not doing a good job of spending its money, it's things we have to spend money on. We don't have a choice. But that's, again, the whole.
That brings up an interesting point, and that's that I want a huge amount of input. I want people to show up at the meetings, and but a couple things. First of all, I don't know how much we should expect from people. Everybody's super busy these days. It seems like everybody's overwhelmed, and I think the electronic media just makes the feeling worse. The other thing is that we are elected to represent the people, and the third thing is they get to vote on the budget at the end. They get to say, you guys got it wrong or you got it right. So I want a huge amount of input, but that being said, I'm gonna understand if, my neighbors say, as wicked cool as it would be to go to a budget meeting, I'm gonna go to my kids' play instead. So.
That's absolutely true, and we've experienced that, for however many years now. But I still think we need to try.
I agree, I agree.
I like the trying part,
Yeah.
that's why I keep
just
poking.
feel like, and we have some new tools available to us, and yes, is it gonna have a huge impact on the input we get? Maybe not,
Well,
but.
I should think like something as just throwing this out as a possibility is, maybe there are plenty of programs that can be used these days to do a graphic presentation with a voiceover. You put that up on the town website or town Facebook page or whatever. You put it out on Front Porch Forum, and at the end of the 3 to 5 minute presentation on the police budget or the, Parks and Recreation budget, you have go to the town website to offer your input in our, access portal or whatever. That might be a way to get people to engage.
What's really important in terms of budget feedback, it's not on, I don't know if you would call it fixed spending, but discretionary versus necessary, right? We have to pay our firefighters, we have to do water, sewer, we have to do things, right? There's a list of things we have to do, and we're trying to do them as efficiently as possible. When somebody sends in a note and says the fire department's too expensive, well, we're doing our due diligence, we're checking, we have an answer for that. But to me, it would be nice to get feedback on the discretionary things in our budget, right? Those things that we spend money on that aren't necessarily, we have to do them, right? They're kind of like spending $12,000 on CCTV. I'm a big proponent of public television, so, but I don't know if everybody is.
We're spending $10,000 on fireworks.
Yeah, that was me.
Well, it's just.
I tried to kill the fireworks during the Great Recession.
Are we spending, with conservation funds and other things, are we spending our discretionary fees in the right place? And I don't know how big a part of the budget they are, but that would be nice to get feedback on. I don't know.
I think we've got a little bit of direction. I think we will proceed with a survey and try to kind of put, and this is going to be a process that we're not going to have in place, for this particular budget. Elements we will be able to do for sure, but I think this is something that's going to grow over time. And so we're just going to have to try different pieces, and this year we can try some pieces, and next year we'll try some more pieces and see what works. We've kind of left Jennifer out of this. I don't know if you have anything to add to what we've been talking about, but.
No, I just want to make sure if we're setting up engagement sessions that we're actually, and we're giving people an opportunity to weigh in on the budget, that it's actually an opportunity where they can have input. There's nothing worse than setting up an opportunity to give input where there's nothing they can do about it anyways. Our wages are our wages. We can't say, oh, we're going to take away health insurance. Well, we can't do that.
Well, that's the difference between discretionary things and non-discretionary.
Yeah, and so just figuring out what are those discretionary items and
well, the other thing is, what do you do with one person's feedback on a town of 10,000? You have to somehow, I don't know if we could be so lucky as to get 500 people's feedback on one topic, or I don't know. Maybe it's like Ted said. I don't know.
That's the point. If we sit there and say, we'd love to get feedback from 500 people. On the other hand, that would be the curse of getting feedback from 500 people.
Well, I'm going to move on. Thank you for that input.
Sorry, thanks.
So the next item I want to touch is economic development focus. This is an issue that came up during the select board retreat, and I just want to let you know that there's a couple things. I think one of them I addressed in my memo here, but we recently had a meeting with representatives from Global Foundries, So that was a good, interesting discussion, and so we'll have to see. There's some changes they're working on, but they shared a little bit with us, but we aren't quite sure where that is all going to end up. And as we get more information and as they're able to release more information, you'll be hearing more about what their plans are. And we.
Concerned about,
No, I don't think, I didn't hear anything other than.
The way you were saying that, I was.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to sound ominous, other than they're an international company and they're competing at an international level, and so they're concerned about things that affect their bottom line, like the cost of electricity was one thing they mentioned, and then you probably saw in the news that they struck a deal with Green Mountain Power, I think it was. It kind of freezes their costs. It doesn't save them money necessarily, and so that is still a concern that they have, because if they, for example, had to buy electricity just across the lake, they can buy it cheaper than they can buy it here. So that's kind of things. So if there is any red flags, that's in that kind of area. We also, I have a meeting, I think it's Thursday, with the Lake Champlain Chamber of Commerce, and so I'll have an opportunity to share our concerns and get feedback from them as well. But one thing that we talked about during the retreat was having a representative from the Lake Champlain Chamber of Commerce come to the select board meeting. And so I wanted to give them some guidance as to what the board is looking for. And so I presented kind of an outline of some of the questions that I'm anticipating the board would have, but I just wanted feedback on those to make sure I'm on the right track, I guess is the question that I have.
So hopefully you looked at the questions that are proposed, and any additions that you might want to make?
I will move on.
Attract business, right? That's what we want. I mean, that's kind of the main.
And the last thing that I wanted to touch on, we've actually touched on a little bit already, was the Public Works Department. I did 2 exit interviews, one yesterday and one today. It's a small department. For us to lose 2 people just before winter is creating a bit of a crisis in the department. When you add,
What were the reasons? Did they, do we do
well,
exit?
the exit interviews are confidential, but one, I can tell you, one is retiring. He's older than 65. And the winter months and the plowing is wearing on people. And so the other one's leaving because he is in a serious relationship and his girlfriend's moving, has a job in Rutland, and he's moving down to Rutland.
So not salary or benefits, which is.
For neither one, no, those 2. But we are, it's a tight labor market. And so when we advertise for openings, we get very few applicants, and we've done a lot of advertising. And we've had a fairly unusually high turnover rate within the department, partly because the labor market's tighter and we're hiring people that we wouldn't necessarily hire. They're marginally qualified. We hired someone a few months back that has a CDL, so that was good, but they have never plowed before. And so, we're gonna have to train them to plow, and that's on top of the 2 openings we have. So I think you get the picture. We're struggling to figure out ways around it, maybe bringing back a retired employee or 2 to help out in a storm, maybe contract out some additional work, whatever it takes. We're gonna try to get through it, but my concern is that the level of service is going to be less than what we would hope for if we had a full staff.
So you're telling us not to become attached to our mailboxes.
That and driving more cautiously on town roads. We're obviously going to do our best, but we're gonna be short-handed, for sure. And pay is a part of that. It's not the entire answer, but it is certainly part of that. And well, anyway, we're trying to address the pay issue, and we're partially addressing it now, and we'll address more probably come July 1st.
Any thoughts, again, I'm just speaking out of turn, any thoughts on you have crisis here, you're heading into winter with down staff, and who knows what the snowfall's gonna be. Any thought of signing bonuses? I've considered that over the years for police. I've never considered for, when I say considered, I thought about it and rejected it. It's a slippery slope, and what ends up happening is if a bunch of communities do it, then we all have to do it. And then you don't gain anything because everyone's doing it. I've strongly opposed signing bonuses and tried to encourage all the managers not to do it because it's just once you do it, everybody's going to do it. Okay.
And as I said, the economy is a major factor right now, and the job market's tight. That will turn around too at some point, and will suddenly become a lot more attractive to where people now work for private companies that are doing construction work. If those companies don't have as much work, then suddenly people are looking for more stable type employment. And generally in the past, when we've hired people, they've stuck with us because they know it's a good, stable job, and we, assuming we can get our pay situation worked out, we'll offer a very competitive wage. We also offer excellent benefits, and certainly that's an advantage we have over many businesses. So that's what our goal is.
I would think of the labor market, you have to be looking pretty good. Better benefits probably than most.
Yes. That is a help, for sure. And stability, even now, if you work for a construction company in the winter months, you're not necessarily guaranteed you're going to have employment. So we do have some advantages, and Bruce has got a couple people he's thinking we might be able to hire, but we'll have to see. All right, that's all I have for this evening.
On the business, we do have a catering permit, I believe.
Yes, this is for an event scheduled for November 28th, 400 Cornerstone Drive, and the catering permit is, the caterer is for a company called Monkey House, doing business as the Monkey House. It's Monkey Hospitality LLC. And it's going to be all inside. It's a business, and the event runs from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's at the Avita Institute. So anyway, staff doesn't have any objections.
Any questions for Rick on that? If not, a motion is needed.
Move we approve.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there any other business to be brought forward tonight? Wait once, going twice. Return. Thank you all.
Good luck tomorrow.
You seem like